Welcome to Freedom Free for All. This is the show for views and opinions on topics which, while vitally important, continue to remain untouched by mainstream society. In today's edition, 3 special guests will be giving their opinions on the following topics: the terrorist attacks of September 11th, 2001, sovereignty, man-made global warming, and the United Nations. This is Freedom Free for All.
My opinion on 9/11. 9/11 changed my life as it did everybody else's. I'll never forget where I was when it happened. And it took me 6 years to actually look at 9/11 and have the courage to find out more about what happened on that day and piece by piece look at the facts of what happened. This day and age, you could ask almost anybody on the street if they remember where they were on 9/11. But you could also ask any person on the street, and I bet less than 1% could tell you which airliner hit which tower first. Most people forget even what year 9/11 happened in. It's 2011. We're coming upon 10 years after 9/11. 9/11 has never been fully been investigated by an independent body outside of the United States. And if you go back to the 9/11 Commission report, authored by Philip Zelikow, and the holes that were missing, and the fact that they omitted World Trade Center Building 7, a 47-story building, one of the largest buildings in New York City, collapsed at 5:26 in the afternoon that day, came down in a controlled demolition fashion, was not even included in the 9/11 report. There was also omissions about firefighter testimony hearing secondary explosive noises, and that was completely omitted. There are so many questions. The world is waiting. I've looked at it. It's in fact consumed my life for a number of years, and it's such a blatant disregard of human intelligence and logic and I find it absolutely appalling and somewhat hysterical when people try to debase my fundamental understanding of 9/11 and the fact that we've never had a real investigation. There are so many unanswered questions, and I ask these questions in the name of the victims' family members and the victims themselves. I've been to New York City. I've seen what's down there. I have a lot of questions. I've been to Washington, D.C. I've seen the Pentagon. We have Nobel laureates that are asking logical questions about 9/11, and we're not getting any answers. There's over 1,500 architects and engineers that have signed a petition calling for a new investigation, looking at the evidence from those attacks. We need a new investigation.
The problem when dealing with 9/11 is getting people to look at it. I mean, really look at it. Because if you do, you can only come to the obvious conclusion that those 3 buildings, I mean Building 1, 2, and Building 7 of the World Trade Complex in New York City could only have been brought down by a controlled demolition. I mean, it's pretty blatantly obvious. Here we are 10 years later, and it's still being used as a pretext to start wars, and it's such an obvious sleight of hand, magic trick. I can't believe that 10 years after this, we're still actually thinking that 110 stories can fall in 10 seconds, and with no necessity to remove the infrastructure. It's just unbelievable.
How does 9/11 impact Canadians today? Does 9/11 even matter to Canadians? I think it does. There were Canadians that died in the tower attacks. There are more Canadians that have died in Afghanistan and all of the resulting wars that 9/11 has been used as an excuse. And we see it as citizens in our daily lives when we need increased taxes to pay for increased securities, all because of 9/11. We need an increased border security. We need increased coast guards. We need to build a police state to protect ourselves from the perceived boogeymen of the terrorists. And they can be anyone. They just say the terrorists. And because of the terrorists in 9/11, we need more security. We trust people less. We look at different ethnicities in Canada with a little bit more suspicion, and we've just become generally a less trusting society. It's being used, and it's 10 years later. I think that it's time to move on and get a real investigation, find out who did it, and stop using it as an excuse to surrender our personal liberties and our freedoms for some perceived security from an imaginary boogeyman.
Well, the anthropological global warming is a deception. It is, it's a perfect example of the method of UN world hegemony. Again, carbon taxes won't do anything to help the environment. They're not designed to. That's why they cannot. They're only designed to enrich and empower the elitist globalists at the expense of the common people around the world. Now, we are threatened, but not by global warming. I don't see any global warming, as a matter of fact, but rather we're threatened by the global warming doctrine. That's the danger. It's our freedoms that are in danger, not the climate. At least we're not in danger from CO2, mind you. There are other real threats to the environment, and these I would like to see us actually address and try to confront instead of the pseudo threat of CO2, which is just part of the natural carbon cycle of life. And so we've really got to move on to the serious matters like GMOs and the poison of the environment.
It's in global warming. It's mind control. When you say the words global warming or climate change, most people have already made up their minds. It's a very divisive issue. It's an us or them issue, where a lot of people on both sides have picked their sides, and they view the other opinion as the other side, or the bad guys, the enemy. What I think is that the climate has always changed. We've seen ice ages, we've seen warm ages. But people generally fear change. And really, that's what this is all about. We have, as humans, this inherent need to control things, to control the environment around us. And some people are so afraid of this change in our climate that they're actually willing to try and control the environment. What I say is, what right do we have as humans to say that the Earth must be set and maintained at a certain temperature? Think about the abuse that could come out of that mindset. Climate change is being used as an excuse to subvert national sovereignty, with laws and pressure to create new taxes and schemes coming from the UN. This is not to say, of course, that pollution is good. Far from it. I'm concerned with real pollution. Mercury in the light bulbs, toxins in children's toys. No longer do we use the words pollution. We don't talk about polluting less, we talk about reducing our carbon footprint. The word pollution is being changed in our vocabulary to the word carbon. Why is that?
My opinion on global warming, after years of looking at both sides of the debate between global warming as it relates to what we call anthropogenic, man-made global warming, and the now associated cause of carbon dioxide, I find that argument is completely baseless. The scientific evidence on both sides of the argument is not pure, but I think it's overwhelmingly obvious that our solar system and the planet and the sun coordinating amongst each other, the sun and the earth have gone through miniature ice ages, we've gone through full-scale ice ages, and we've gone through warming periods over millions of years. before humans were populating the earth, and before we could build structures and commercialize and industrialize our individual countries. I think it's a life cycle. I think it's a planetary life cycle, and to use the argument on the global warming side that carbon dioxide is a pollutant and that man-made carbon dioxide is responsible for temperature variation is a fallacy and not provable. I even noted the fact that the founder of the Weather Network, has gone and sued with thousands of other scientists, Al Gore, to rebuke his statements that he made in his documentary, An Inconvenient Truth. If you look at the big picture, carbon dioxide, and the creation of these new industries and these carbon trading schemes, these carbon trading exchanges in Chicago and Montreal, this is a new opportunity for the global power elite to take advantage of every single person on earth and every single product and every single service that's ever existed. It is actually fundamentally a tax on human life. And for me, that's completely reprehensible. It's completely unlawful, and it goes against my individuality and my sovereignty. And to use the carbon trading scheme as a mechanism for global government and removing of our individual liberties.
What is your opinion on the UN, its cost and its supposed purpose? Well, simply the UN, despite it has the facade of being a mechanism for world peace, actually it's pretty obvious. It's a mechanism for world hegemony rather than world peace. I mean, all you have to do is look at the bombing in Libya. Why are we bombing Libya? Why? Because supposedly some guy strafed his own citizens with machine gun fire, and then we bomb them? I mean, how is this going to, promote peace in the region? It's obviously just for taking over the place. I think you have to look at the IMF and the World Bank, which are institutions of the United Nations. What are the antics of the IMF around the world? What is their effect on the nations where they've been allowed to impose their economic controls? Well, the cost is obviously beyond catastrophic.
The United Nations, to me, is a prime example of global governance gone wrong. We've brought in the worst of the worst military dictators to participate in a fully funded government system that is not participated by the general public. There is no oversight, there is no accountability. Every single year, every member that participates in the United Nations has to pay hundreds of millions of dollars. That money comes directly out of the taxpayers of each individual country without our approval and without, again, our oversight. The United Nations has been a complete, utter failure, in my opinion. For example, the Oil for Food program directly funded Saddam Hussein and his son. There have been instances after instances where the United Nations has provoked war when it operates under the guise of global peace. The United Nations is not lawful, in my opinion, and I believe that it needs to be dismantled immediately. And Canada needs to leave and unfund the United Nations.
My opinion on the UN is that it concerns me. It seems to be the apex of centralization of governments across the world, filled with unelected and appointed bureaucrats making laws for lands that they don't even live in. overpowering the voice of the local community with the voice of the perceived greater good. It is the farthest point away from local government, and I believe that the people who live in the communities will make better decisions and more informed decisions because they have a vested interest in their community and in making sure that their decisions are in their best interest. Plus, I believe that the potential for corruption is a much greater risk in the UN, because the members of the UN almost never have to face the public for the decisions that they make and foist upon the people. It should always remain in a position that is unable to collect taxes from people or countries and unable to mandate laws upon any man or nation. Sovereignty is the ability and the right to self-govern. Personally, I have a lot of questions about sovereignty, such as, where does it come from? Does it only apply to a macro national level, or does it come from the individuals in the nation? Does sovereignty also apply to the individual? Are we sovereign beings? I believe that we are no longer allowed to be sovereign beings, both from a state level and at a societal level. There has been such a culture of fear generated in our Canadian society that it almost seems suspicious when one decides to try to enforce their national sovereignty or their personal sovereignty. This is very obvious when you look at our drug laws, our tax laws, and our property use laws. If you decide that these laws do not represent you or your personal values, the state decides that it does not matter and that there are aspects of your life that you do not have the right to govern yourself. Even if your actions do not harm another, we are seeing this on a macro level as well, with international bodies and organizations such as the World Trade Organization, the World Health Organization, and the UN. These organizations make rules and laws that are not created by the nations and the people that they are supposed to apply to. You cannot remain a sovereign nation when you have a global governing body which possesses the ability to trump sovereign nations' laws. By the very definition of sovereignty, you cannot have sovereign nations or people under a global governance system.
My opinion on sovereignty. If you look at the questions and the things that we've just discussed, the United Nations, the global warming, religion, 9/11, the wars that we have going on endlessly around the world, and the biggest culprit of all, the fiat monetary system that we have completely undermined our sovereignty for hundreds of years. Freedom was a test in a new direction for mankind. Freedom is new. For thousands of years, societies have lived around the world under tyrants and dictators and authoritarian rule. Freedom is new. Freedom is popular. But freedom has responsibilities, and we as individuals must follow up and hold ourselves accountable for the liberty that we seek on a daily basis. If you don't know the laws, more so if you don't understand lawfulness, and if you don't understand yourself, then it's going to be a struggle for you to get through this life. You will follow the status quo. Sovereignty comes in many shapes and sizes. National sovereignty, individual sovereignty. You have the freedom of religion, freedom of choice, freedom of speech, freedom of mobility. These weren't given to you. These are things that you are inherently given. These are your unalienable rights since birth. Our sovereignty has been completely undermined over the last few decades. The United States has been leading the way in undermining the world's sovereignty as a police state with over 700 military bases around the world and 130 countries. They spend 10 times more than all other countries combined on their military infrastructure. There's a lot of people making a lot of money, and at the same time they're taking away our individual civil liberties, our sovereignty, and they're making a killing off of it, literally. We need to take the power back. And if you look at it from one more perspective, these international trade agreements, North American Free Trade Agreement, the World Trade Organization, CAFTA, the World Health Organization, these all undermine our sovereignty. And it's important that we understand what these are and what our values are. And when you know what your values are, you can live your life fulfilled. And I challenge everybody to look at your values and live by your values.
Sovereignty should be based on the individual, in my opinion. Not any state, not a queen or a king. Human individuals should be considered sovereign as individuals. No state or corporation should have any more authority than that of an individual over that individual's freedoms or rights. It's pretty plain and simple. Sovereignty should be a basic human right. When we consider all the things we've just pointed out, these previous 4 questions, what does this mean about our media? I challenge you to start thinking. Media personalities are just actors who lie. That's plain and simple. They lie for money, so that makes them whores. Okay? So, if a person believes the lie of a whore, what does that mean? That means that person is a fool. So stop believing everything that comes out of that idiot box. Start doing your own independent research. And take research from conflicting points of view. Not just the ones that support the mainstream media or the ones that are congenial to your prejudice, but actually do some serious research. Take control of your mind and thereby take control of your life. And stop listening to that idiot box.
Ladies and gentlemen, you bear the weight of the world these days. Life as we know it is in juxtaposition. The air is unfit to breathe, the food is unfit to eat, and war's insanity is pressing and at our doorstep as we begin to enter Libya, Canada's 3rd war engagement since 2000. One can only wonder why we didn't learn from Vietnam, why we didn't learn from World War I, why our public servants don't know that in this time, war can only cause loss. At juxtaposition, everything is backwards, ladies and gentlemen. Our schools produce nothing more than workers, our diet is killing us. The banks are robbing us, those private banks. And yet, that is merely the tip of the iceberg. Crack is still in our streets, meth is rampant, AIDS is still an epidemic, and starvation is stricken on the many, and not the few. Furthermore, you should realize there is still a growing megalith of failure yet to be exposed. In juxtaposition, what a time to be alive in. It's a time of education and social networking, a time of information and the year of the young. It's time to flip the script, to give everyone land, to relinquish all forms of money and economic game, to usher in a truly free market paradigm conducive to altruism and not capitalism. The bare essentials are in abundance with today's technology. Make no mistake, we have electric cars and electric engines. Make no mistake, we have super healthy, super yummy food. Make no mistake, we have super efficient, rapidly deployable, easily built homes. We have personal greenhouses, and the wage slave is no more. We have the homes, we have the technology, we have the resources, and make no mistake, there is much more than enough land to go around, ladies and gentlemen. Let us remember the time where love is real, and it's about the power of love, not that juxtaposed. Before it's gone, look around you with newborn eyes and open minds, and you will see things are backwards for now. The culture has stricken you. TV programmed you. Make no mistake, look around you and see for yourself that you are a farm. You have been hijacked. The driver's seat has been taken from the populace by corporations, by those demons we call politicians. Those pop-up houses that last twice as long, that yummy superfood, and education orders of magnitude greater than what's conceived of now. The future is juicy, ripe with altruism, with individualism, with libertarianism, with enforcement of a new breed. The future will be a quantum leap shift from this archaic backwards joke The future will be all yours to enjoy, iPhones and all. The future will be vitalizing. The future will be conducive, peace-locked forever. The future will provide for you because that's what humans can create. The future will provide for you. Make no mistake, the future is now. Thank you.